You're inside the brain from Laz Emporium, and today we're talking to the graffiti artist Stash. Stash, or Mr. Stash to you, is an especially innovative, prolific, and respected New York graffiti artist of the old school. Aren't you, dude? He painted trains with Zephyr in the 80s and exhibited alongside Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat, aged only 17. His training pad sketchbook, featuring outlines of subway trains for writers to practice their tags on at home before venturing into the night, is cherished by graffiti aficionados. The Merchant Ivory Productions movie Slaves of New York featured a graffiti artist called Stash, and the man himself makes a cameo as a graffiti writer. Stash founded his streetwear brand Subwear in 1994, and creating high-impact lifestyle design pieces is as much a part of his artistic identity as exhibiting canvases. The approach has resulted in a number of hugely successful collaborations with brands such as Leica Cameras, Nike, Bathing Ape, Burton Snowboards, and Casio. His most recent even gallery exhibition showed 25 canvases at number 53 Gallery in East Hampton during autumn 2020. You can follow him on Instagram and the handle right here at Mr_Stash. And his new website is up now, blueworksstudio.nyc. Stash, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Steve and Laz at the Brain.
So this is you here in 1983, right? And what kind of stage,
Yes, sir.
or sort of vandalism career were you at?
Wow. I think I was probably, very early, just, real early developmental, trying to get my name, trying to get composition. I was pretty good at tagging, but, that's different than outlining and learning to use spray paint to draw your name that big. And so even though we had just started painting subways at that time, we were still using handball courts and big walls to practice, for our subway.
And this is New York, right? Whereabouts?
That's on the east side of New York, by the FDR, which is the East Side Highway in the city, on 23rd Street, this particular piece.
And that was the hotspot at the time. Where were you kind of active?
Oh, I was living in the East Village, so the whole downtown area was our playground.
Uh-huh.
We would walk, every direction and just, see how far we can go and paint and stuff.
And you were kind of honing your craft before moving on to the trains, yeah?
Yeah, I think it was simultaneous. I think we were sort of, busy, rocking our neighborhood to the best of our ability while venturing out at night and other times of the day to paint trains.
And let's have a look at some of these trains first up. So this is a wonderful photograph.
This was a later one that we're looking at. It was probably towards the end of the subway era. This is what's called a scrapyard, which after the act of subway painting was pretty much done, there was a period of time where, I had moved on, I painted for a certain amount of time and went on to do other things. But this particular train yard was called the scrapyard, and it was not far from where we lived, and it was in Brooklyn. And they had just all sorts of miscellaneous, proper subway cars where they went before they went to their final, graveyard, right? Before they got disassembled and, chopped for parts or thrown in a quarry or whatever they do with them. For us, it was just a great palette. It was a great canvas. You wanted to just go and get the photo, and reminisce. And, painting subway cars is as much as for the photo and the background and the visual it is for the getting your name up, so even at the very end of our active subway career, a lot of people were still, very excited to go to the scrapyard to do your name on a train.
And what was the, for the newbies, for the urban art crowd, what was the attraction of the trains? There's that photo a bit bigger. And here's another one here, looks a bit older.
Yeah, that's probably from like 84, 85. What we're looking at. That's an active train on the 5 line. You know, God, man, when I think back of painting trains, what a treat it was. Like just the experience and it was a little bit of planning. You had to know where the trains are parked and you had to kind of have an idea of what you wanted to paint. And then you just had to take a deep breath and jump in and go do it. It wasn't that big of a deal,
And
certainly back then.
what was like the attitude at the time of the public?
I think the public was a little annoyed at you know, let's go back for 1 second and say that in the very early beginning, the pioneers were creating these masterpieces and they were undisturbed. And as the movement sort of matured, you have people going, I'm going to quote a friend of mine, West. I just heard him do a talk about when he was painting trains and the choices he made were based on the time and his entry to when he started painting trains. So I'm going to say, much like West, because it's on my brain that he had mentioned it, that I think the public was more annoyed at the overlapping and the mess that was made in between, what was left behind. And it wasn't just so much doing the mural. You can see in this photograph, there's a lot of loose graffiti and tags above the murals, in between the doors, on the windows. And I think the public was probably more like, what the fuck is that, than they were to the murals themselves. Do you know what I'm saying? Because
Hmm.
at a certain point, it was like every square inch was getting bombed, hit, tagged, pieced on, or what have you. And so, we were left with going over certain things. Sometimes your paint would go over it. Sometimes what you were going over would kind of come through your paint if you didn't have really good paint with you, or Rust-Oleum of the time. It was definitely like it got very muddy. And so my impression, if I were to look back, I would think like, yeah, I could see why the public's impression wasn't so as excited as those of us participating within the movement. You know what I mean? There were periods where I would fully debate that by the masterpieces and what was happening. But then as it sort of got a bit grouped up on, that changed, and so I think that probably had a little bit to do with, how it went.
And the tags, I mean, you're going to have to correct me if I'm sort of woefully ignorant. When did
Yeah.
when did the tags stop becoming sort of marking territory?
They never did. They're still doing that today. Tagging is the quickest, easiest form of branding, right? Let's just call it what it is. We call it branding today, but we didn't do that then. We didn't use that language. But you take a tag. It's a very quick way of marking I was there, I bombed it, I was there. There's a lot of ways we could phrase it and look at it. And even though there's muralization going on the outside of the train, right?
Mhm.
People can still tag above your car. And now people that are looking at the mural look up and they see your name.
Mm.
So, it's sort of like a combination of the ripple effect, the domino effect of, a word. A lot of people tag on other people's murals and they deface them, but they're like, yeah, but now they know my name. Now, that's pretty fucking stupid in my mind, but I get it. I see and certainly when there's a power play of younger writers, older writers, people coming from different neighborhoods, how people dealt with each other, it was pretty interesting.
And these days, the trains are sort of unpaintable. Is that right?
No, I mean, people are having a renaissance actually today. And during this pandemic, and I hope everybody out there listening is staying safe and, healthy to everybody. I'm wishing everybody all the best. I know it's been a very trying period we've all gone through, I have to say. But this pandemic has brought out some incredible people
Yeah,
that
London is covered
just
in tags. It's amazing. I even saw somebody hit
yeah,
a hedge. They used white
right.
paint.
There you go. So people are getting very creative again. And in those little windows of darkness, in those cloaks of darkness, people have come out and done some amazing work. I'm so impressed at what I'm seeing in the New York City subway system. I haven't been on the train to see them live and active, but thanks to social and online, man, guys are going off and doing like whole car, 10 cars at a time, and just masterful, masterful monster pieces, and I said monster piece, I meant masterpieces, but on a monster scale. They're so big and so just strong. I'm psyched to see it. I have to say it's refreshing for me. So yeah, no, there was a period where there was no trains painted, and then now a lot of trains are making the way out again. For some reason, it's great.
And this is where you've taken the train motif, and in the background, it's got another one of your graphic themes, which is the repeated nozzle. So tell us a bit about this mural here.
Well, this particular mural we're looking at was done for the New York XL, which is an e-game team from New York that was part of the, I believe owned by the New York Mets. A very dear friend of mine, Colette, who was real excited when she saw some of my work and said, "Hey, we're doing a pop-up in New York. What kind of New York sort of theme, can we do for the environment?" So this was when I painted the mural. The room was then filled with computer terminals, all the stuff around this amazing pop-up that they did. And so, obviously the New York City theme, spray paint on subways is very identifiable, right? And so using spray paint, the background that you see, the spray nozzle, I started using that as a graphic image in repeat form when I started making clothing. And then my graphic language bled into my painting world. And so the spray nozzle in repetition to me is a way of saying graffiti art without using graffiti lettering or b-boy characters or in that form. Here, I just use it as the clouds in the sky to just sort of identify that it's my work, because it's going to be camouflaged, like I said, with computers and terminals, and people are going to be sitting in front of the mural and stuff. So,
And it,
this is just a New York inspired mural with a bit of my DNA.
and is there? I see on the tag kind of closest to you in the photo is a different kind of style to the ones in the foreground.
Yeah, well, there's in the graffiti movement in the New York City subway, vernacular, if you will. That's how I learned it. There's the tag, a quick, you write your name, and then there's what's called a throw up. A throw up is a loose rendition of either your name or an acronym of your name that you can do very quickly with a loose fill and a sharp outline, something made to just be a bit bigger than a tag that you can just basically throw up, blap, 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 wherever you go, up and down the train line or different wherever. So it's a much looser fill, quicker process than what you see closer in the foreground, as you suggest, the more stylized with purpose and outline with
Is that going to be
highlights
called
and
an
whatever.
outline as opposed to a throw up?
Yeah, it's more of like that's why I got tripped up on my own language. Some people refer to it as wild style or a certain kind of lettering,
Uh-huh.
technical lettering or wild style, more stylized
And
because
it's just come back in such a big way.
come
That
back, it's
style,
never
and
left.
yeah, in the last sort of 5 years, 6 years or so.
Yeah, I think it just never left. It's just sort of, it gets highlighted and comes back to the forefront when needed. It's been an amazing evolution.
I
What
mean,
people Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna. I'm not supposed to be interjecting Joe Rogan style, am I? But it's it's a cyclical thing, isn't it? A lot of your Banksy graphics and your urban art is very sort of idea led, and this is more of a sort of abstract, color based, emotion based, right brain sort of way of expressing oneself.
Yeah, but this is also a different thing than, hey, I'm going out to do me for me. This is now taking a brief or working and trying to be harmonious with their vision as well, but allowing me to still be me. So sometimes there are like little compromises we make, but
Mhm.
not enough that it still doesn't celebrate A, the movement, and B, where we come from in the truth of what we do, like, using spray paint in this form is real. It's not, hey, let's do an advertisement to will use spray paint just to attract
Mhm.
the 18 to 36, demographic. We use spray paint because that's our tool. it's what we do.
So this is a style of artwork you do, sort of incorporating the subway maps into an artwork.
It's in the 80s and early 90s, or this is for me, this piece is modern, but I started this style in the late 80s. And by that time, there'd been so many amazing artists and how they express themselves, and muralists that can do caricatures and abstract, expressionists. And, I wanted to sort of really push and define my own style. And like I said, I was very interested in trying to use iconography and tie in things that, are part of our day to day. The subway map to me was the perfect graphic inlay for a graffiti piece. And I started painting maps inside my lettering on canvas in like 86, I think was maybe the first one I did. And graphically it made sense. And then it just looked right. It felt and looked right to me. I took some time off from these. I started making these again recently.
And oh, that's not supposed to be it. And we're going to talk about that piece later.
That's
Uh,
fine.
so this is you've just done a lot of very successful collaborations, which other artists can be quite nervous about, and you have sort of owned it, as it were, with all of these, and you've done a number of like really, really successful and sought after pieces. And we're just going to talk here about you doing the logo for K2 Skis and Snowboards. So you've obviously made your mark here on their office. Tell us a bit about where it is and what you did and what you're doing with these guys.
Well, K2 has been around since, gosh, I mean, I want to say probably 60s, and maybe even older, 70, 76. I don't know my introduction to K2 was that was the first pair of skis that I got when I was in it was 1979. Okay. Now you push the clock forward. I got to work with the brand. A very good friend of mine named John Colonna invited me to come out to their warehouse in Seattle. They're in an industrial park not far from the airport. I don't really know Seattle. I don't know where I was demographically, but I know there were flights overhead. But their warehouse and the equipment in their warehouse hasn't been touched by graffiti artists. I can tell you that. And they invited me. They were doing their annual, I guess, their sales party, and they were having a big event in their it's not their warehouse. I'm sorry. It's their innovation lab. I forgot what they call it. I'm a little spaced out, but it's their innovation lab where they make skis and test them and snowboards. And they do all sorts of amazing product testing and building there. And they asked me to do their logo, which you see in front of us on the slide, in my camouflage style. So it looks a lot smaller than it is on this particular slide, but it's probably 6 feet tall. And while I was out there, some of the other slides you shown, they were like, hey, if you want to kind of walk around and just do what you do, dress up our place a little. So I did a little stash piece on one wall and an S2 on some old lockers. This is, our good friends that worked there after I'd done the piece. They came to check up on me to see if I did my job. And I think we did okay.
And how hard is it to that camouflage style looks like a lot harder than it looks to
No, not really hard. I mean, this I've painted a lot of camouflage recently, and the larger scale is easier to paint. It's easier to sort of apply it. This particular piece was so big, and I taped their logo to make it their logo. It wasn't my eye, hey, this is what I think your logo looks like. So I masked the area, which made it a lot simpler to just get the camouflage the way I wanted within the tape lines itself.
and you've got a pair of skis coming out with these
There we
things,
go.
right?
This particular slide we're looking at, part of me, is the camo, and you can see the blue tape, where the red stops and the gray. You can sort of see how I took that just for scale for my own records. Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, we had a lot of things planned together with K2, but then I got invited to work on a pair of skis that I learned the athletes that ride for them are now going to be in the Olympics. So I think the artwork I did may be on a Olympic skier.
Incredible.
So props to K2 and their crew.
And so that's you up next to the big logo on the wall.
Yeah, I took that just to show scale. I think I was texting with my son, who's he's 16. He's just starting to paint, and I like to show him as I do projects, like, hey man, you can. It's not that hard.
Fantastic. And just, I mean, just going to drop this in. So this is a
Yeah,
BJJ gi, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gi, which is like the what kimono, the classics of the martial arts,
yeah,
judo, karate, etc. outfit.
yes,
And
sir.
this is a whole one of those that you're doing with a BJJ brand called Albino and Preto. Has that been difficult getting it onto the fabric line?
No, Albino Preto, besides being a proper jujitsu brand, with the gis, they have a lifestyle portion of what they do, and we started building together on making products. And RV, the director and owner of the brand, has so many fantastic ideas. He thought it'd be great to maybe do some painting on gi fabric because the texture of the fabric and the colors and abstract I
Canvas,
work on.
yeah.
He saw like a really good. He saw it before I saw it. I'm gonna just totally love him for that. And I started painting on gi fabric just as an introduction to what could become and how we could take it from there. And with the love of RV and Albino, they gifted me some fabric to play with. And when I was in the Laz Emporium last week in Bristol, we decided to let's see we know how it works with spray paint and acrylic. Let's see how it works under the UV printer. And I think we were onto something. Thank you, RV, and thank you, Laz and Laz Emporium. And that result is what we're looking at in this slide here. The color is so vibrant and so rich. The texture is what I think is going to be really you don't see in the photo, but it's the texture of the gi fabric that makes it so incredible. You know,
The
but seeing
contemporary,
these colors is incredible.
yeah, it really is, isn't it? Wow. And there it is, like contemporary technical grappling and subcultural metropolitan outsider art together at last.
Yeah,
And
because it's only right? Artists are athletes, athletes are artists. It makes sense. It's not too foreign. It's just when you get to stumble on something, like, when's the first time that you did something for the first time? You know what I'm saying?
mm,
It's been a while. And it's nice when we can sort of creatively join forces and create things, and the output is so to me, it really, I think we hit a note we need to explore more on. And for those watching and listening, this piece will be available on Laz Emporium. I'm sure there'll be really good photographs of this piece to show the texture and just what I'm talking about on how vibrant it is. So stay tuned for that.
well, it's two organic cultures, isn't it, that have risen up without a great deal. I mean, obviously, a lot of commodification has come into both eventually, but it's not like commodification is essential to do both or do either. Quite,
No,
quite the opposite.
this is a yeah. I think this particular project was two people had a conversation and look what happened. Very organic, very sort of we stumbled on something. It's sort of like, okay, you want to try? Oh yeah, hey, okay, and here we are. We succeeded, I believe.
Talk about some murals. So this is quite different to your work on the trains, for example.
Yeah,
Where was
yeah.
this and when was this?
I believe. Gosh, I mean, 20. I'm really bad with dates. I was invited by a mural festival called Pow Wow, and it originally started in Hawaii, Pow Wow, Hawaii, and then they do it globally all around different, in the US and different states. in different countries around the world. And I was invited by Pow Wow Worcester. And Worcester is in Massachusetts, right? Probably
Mhm.
about
Where
an
the X-Men
hour.
are from. Where the X-Men are from.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
everyone
complete.
must say that. Sorry, dude. Go on.
No, you're good. We were about an hour from Boston, just for demographic purposes, for those sort of wondering where Worcester is. And I was invited to paint a mural. And when I learned the mural was going to be on a school and the scale of what I was getting to do, I'm always fascinated with trying to push myself to do not necessarily things so beyond my norm, but I do like to push myself. And I always wanted to paint like photo style. I've spent a lot of time breaking images down on the computer to a way that I almost can understand how to retranslate that in spray paint. I'm not a muralist in that way. I'm a graffiti artist, lettering, and from there graphics and stuff. So stuff like this for me is very new. But then we also have a bunch of tools we can use, like projectors and computers. And, this is not that difficult. It was a lot more preparation than what I'm used to for murals that I've done. And then technically, a little bit, definitely more photorealistic than what people know me for. But I still felt like, hey, man, I have a great opportunity to participate in a wonderful mural project. That these guys, I got invited very happily to be part of this festival. And when I learned it was on a school, I thought like, hey, I want to paint something that would, work and sit into the landscape, not just a graffiti train image. I've played with taking my photography and doing murals of it other places, but I wanted something a bit more, I don't know, I don't even know how to say it, like softer than what I've done or been known for. I wanted something not as hard edge, or obvious, right?
Well,
So
I mean, now it's a
I
bigger
painted some
photograph.
cherry blossoms. Oh, what's up?
Well, now it's a photograph. I can see the similarities to your other work.
Yeah. I mean, it's graphically broken down, right? It's not photorealistic in that sense where a lot of shading or whatever. It's a graphic of a photograph that's enlarged on a wall. And it's probably 25 feet tall. It's about 7 feet off the ground. I mean, I painted it on the lift that you see directly in front of you. And I had a great time. I loved it. I love doing big scale stuff. That's a lot of fun.
So, what's your old school? Pardon me. What's your old school writer's opinion of these kind of big wall guys?
It's funny, you get everything from, yo, that's kind of dope, but I don't understand the subject matter. Or, what do you mean you used a projector? I don't use a projector. Or, everybody talks from their own experience or what they might have done if they had the opportunity to do the wall. Half the time it's, I didn't ask you that. So whatever. I don't, it's mind over matter, right? It doesn't matter because you don't mind. You know what I'm saying? Like it's all good. I don't really, think too much. But to me, I use a projector because it's a modern day tool. Like you could tell time on a fucking sundial, but I prefer to wear a watch. You know what I mean? So if I'm using a projector to get the image up quickly, easily, versus taking my time and using a graph method or all these other methods, those are very great ways of doing it. But like, hey, you know what? I found a quicker way. I want to work smarter, not harder. So some of the critique I've gotten is not so much, yo, you don't know how to use spray paint, yo, but what do you mean you use a projector? Or, why are you painting, cherry blossoms? Or, like you hear some silly stuff, which I don't give a fuck about.
Well, I shouldn't say this, but I think a lot of people who maybe I shouldn't say.
Yeah.
I think there are people who use techniques like projectors who won't admit they do because they're worried about their kind of artistic talent, and who worries about artistic talent these days in the days of kind of Damien Hirst, where I mean, having talent is fantastic, but talent and imagination are not always found in the same people, and sometimes they need to borrow from the other camp a little.
Okay, but when you look at a piece like this, just if you were a spectator walking around, would you be like, "Oh, that shit is whack"? He obviously, you don't know how it's not like it's a tool in aid of. I could have done it by brush, but I use spray. It works 5 times faster. I mean, there's so many ways that it could have been done. You can do it a lot of ways, right?
It's
But
beautiful.
I don't care to say I use a projector. That's how I did it. If you came to the mural festival, you'll see a lot of people projecting their images, getting things in place. We're on a limited clock. We can't be there all month. It's a 5-day fest. There's a lot of limitations, and there's a lot of reason why people make choices to do what they do. A lot of artists use projectors. They don't need to. It's a choice too, to speed along the process, or just let's get this going. Or, hey, when people come to a mural festival, you don't want to see them fumbling. You want to see them coloring. You want to see all the good stuff, you know?
Yeah, you don't want to see them kind of going down on the cherry picker and standing back and doing the thing with the square.
I mean, maybe they do, but that just takes a lot longer, you know? And so my impression of a lot of mural festivals and muralists are, let's get everything up and ready, and let's give them what they come to see, you know? So again, I don't mind. I use a projector here and there, and I use it when I need it. It's a tool like everything else.
So this is your latest art exhibition, or this is from your latest art exhibition.
Yeah, that was from my latest. I had a gallery exhibition with a gallery called N93 Gallery in East Hampton. And yeah, mapping memory. Um, it's just sort of like a fall back in my mind of all the places, colors, and textures, from being a urban person traveling. A lot of this colors and textures comes from just being an urban kid and the beautiful decay of my city, watching it sort of deteriorate due to weather and just whatever it is. So a lot of color and texture, and that's the origin of it. And so mapping memory is just really falling back on where I've come from and where I've been.
And did you say there was a charity aspect to this show?
No, that was a different painting that we were looking at. But prior to this exhibition, there was a painting in our slide group, Steve,
Yeah.
that I had, like a lot of artists and a lot of people, really stepped up locally and abroad for themselves. And, so like many artists, I contributed. I donated the sales of 10 pieces, and gave the money to the New York City Health and Hospitals Organization, to help the doctors that were on call, on the front line right in the beginning of COVID. I was like, we all felt helpless. So one of the paintings that we had reviewed earlier wasn't from this exhibition.
And that's very civic minded of you, by the way. So I love this show, and what I loved about this show was the kind of the combination of the graffiti influences and the kind of psychedelic influences. Is that intentional at all, or was it just a color thing?
No, a little bit of both. I mean, like I said, mapping memory, growing up in New York, going through all the different phases, the seasons, just living how I lived, you know, the movement, the color, the trains going by, the graffiti on the train, everything has a stamp in my brain. And, it's just, I try to just fall back on my own. I want my own voice visually. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather be seen, not heard. And so I'm trying to create works that people will learn to identify. Oh, that's a stash painting without my graffiti word across it. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
so a lot of these images and the colors and the contrasts are the equivalent of my voice, and what I want to, and I want to, how I remember different things around me as I pass through time.
And you're associated with New York. We got people moving out of London here in droves. What's your kind of feeling about how these cities have changed over the past few decades?
I mean, I think it just got expedited because of the pandemic. All those people talking about moving activated, like almost immediately in the uncertainty of the time we're living in. A lot of people, like for me, I don't see a lot of change here in the city. It's all really recent. There was a slow sort of movement. Hey, we're going to, maybe will, till, yo, we're out. You know what I'm saying? So I travel a lot. and pre-pandemic, I should say, I traveled a lot. And so I was in London a lot, I was in Japan a lot, and on the West Coast of the States. And so, I was watching things sort of happen, but it wasn't as quick and furious as it has been of the last year or two because of the pandemic. You know, it was nice. It was a slow move that I think was eventual and purposeful. It wasn't as expedited and oh shit, you know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about what you've got going on with us at the moment. So this is the Krylon Project, which is ambitious to the point of Kublai Khan uh, screen print and also sort of unique variants, etc. We're going to talk a bit as well about some of those in a sec. But why Krylon, and what does it mean to you?
Krylon is the probably premier American spray brand. We have Rust-Oleum and a few other name brands, but Krylon, the offering of what Krylon did in the early days, because spray paint wasn't made for doing murals. Spray paint was made for lawn furniture, perhaps your dresser or what have you. And Krylon just had a really beautiful range of paint. It was really good available spray paint, on your local hardware or wherever. And so, that was my first paint that I ever really used to do graffiti. I love the logo, the can. It's so iconic to me. It just has like a, real heritage. It's a heritage brand for me personally. And this particular can I still have probably from 1986, maybe 87, the can that I had photographed to use for this particular graphic. So it has a lot of provenance with me personally. I also made my first sculpture, which is my hand, like a bronze of my hand holding a can. And the can I chose to use was a Krylon from this era as well, because there are little subtleties in the shape of cans, the nozzles. It has changed slightly for what's branding, today available on the market from the way these cans were made back in the day. So for my own self, this is my sort of entry into the world of graffiti was with Krylon. So I'm paying homage.
Hmm. And these are some of the routed pieces we've got coming
Yes.
here. One of your famous nozzles on the right and a can on the left. And these were test proofs, were they? That you then tagged up, and people can see you doing that on our Instagram in that highlights thing bit.
Yeah. Sometimes, what's that expression? One man's trash is another man's treasure,
Yeah.
like it's so hard to be in a print shop where all the proofs or tests they look great prior to getting all that high-end material or wherever we're landing the final ink. And so we decided that, what, like, let's make an offering. I'll hand sign them all with spray paint. We'll make them more unique. I'll sign them as well. And let's just sort of, you know, offer these as well because they're beautiful prints. They may not be on that 300-pound Strathmore branded edged paper, whatever the wording is, but nevertheless, the art is real. And I think Laz Emporium wants to make things available on multiple levels, for everybody. So that's I think where we came from. So that's where we're going.
This is it. And so those are going to be available now, essentially. If they're not available now, by the time you're listening to this, they will be very
Sure.
imminently.
Yeah, and there's a lot of original one-off pieces. I was fortunate enough to come and check out the lab, my first visit leaving the States in a year, and it was like art boot camp, 3 days of just, hey, what can we make? So a lot of the one-offs, I have to say to you guys are, I'm really excited and proud to put them out, and really grateful to Steve Lazaretti's and Laz Emporium and yourself, sir, for making that all happen. So thank you very much.
Oh, dude, you've been absolutely fantastic. It's been an honor and a pleasure to but be alongside someone with your kind of work ethic and talent and imagination. So it's hopefully a little bit of that has rubbed off on us. So people can go and see your new website now. Have I got the address right? Blueworks.
Yes, sir.
.nyc. They can follow you on Instagram at Mr_Stash, and head over right now to lazemporium.com to take a look at our range of pieces at all kinds of price points from Stash. Dude, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you as well. Send my best to Steve as well.